So children, in the last class you have seen that Jody and Melville went to the forest to find the fawn, but they could not find it, and they went near the place where last day they have seen the fawn. But there they could not find him, and the Jody was tried to find out the small footprints on the sand. But the last night rain washed out all the footprints except the cat and bazaar. Let's move to the next part. We will see the now. Movement directly in the foot front of him strained him so that he tumbled backward. The fawn lifted its face to his. It turned its head with a wide wandering motion and shook him through with a stare of its liquid eyes. It was querying. It made no effort to rise or run. Jody could not trust himself to move. He whispered, "It's me." The fawn lifted its nose, scenting him. He reached out one hand and laid it on the soft neck. The touch made him delirious. He moved forward on all fours until he was close beside it. He put his arms around its body. A light convulsion passed over it, but it did not stay. Now explanation, children. Jody was shocked after having experienced some movement in front of him, and he fell backwards. It was the fawn. The fawn lifted his face with a wide and wandering motion to see Jody and stared at him with his liquid eyes. That it felt. Jody shook. The fawn was shaking with a slight rapid motion. The fawn sat still and made no effort to run. On the other hand, Jody could not move too, but he whispered lightly, "It's me." The fawn sniffed and smelled him. Jody reached out with his hand and laid it on his soft neck. His touch made the fawn excited, and he moved forward in an attempt to be close to Jody. Jody put his arms around the fawn, which made the fawn shiver slightly, but he did not stare, which means he was not frightened but comforted. Now let's move to the next part. He stroked its sides as gentle as though the fawn were a cheetah deer and he might break it. Its skin was very soft. It was sleek and clean and had a sweet scent of grass. He rose slowly and lifted the fawn from the ground. Its legs hung limply. They were surprisingly long, and he had to hoist the fawn as high as possible under his arm. Now explanation, children. Jody crossed the sides of his body so gently as if it were as fragile as a cheetah deer. The fawn was soft, sleek and clean, and even possessed a pleasant scent of grass. Jody lifted the fawn from the ground in a way that hung his limbs in the air. The fawn's legs were quite long, so Jody had to hold him as high as possible under his arms. Let's move to the third step. He was afraid that it might kick and bleat at sight and smell of its mother. He skirted the clearing and pushed his way into the thicket. It was difficult to fight through his burden. The fawn's legs caught in the bushes and he could not lift his own with freedom. He tried to shield its face from prickling vines. Its head bobbed with its stride. His heart thumped with the marvel of its expectance of him. He reached the trail and walked as fast as he could until he came to the intersection with the road home. He stopped to rest and set the fawn down on its dangling legs. It wavered on them. It looked at him and bleated. He said, enchanted, "I will carry you after I get my breath." He remembered his father saying that a fawn would follow if it had first been carried. He started away slowly. The fawn stared after him. He came back to it and stroked it and walked away again. He took a few stumbling steps toward him and cried piteously. It was willing to follow him. It belonged to him. It was his own. He was light-headed with his joy. He wanted to fondle it, to run and romp with it, to call to it to come to him. He dared not alarm it. He picked it up and carried it in front of him over his two arms. It seemed to him that he walked without effort. Now explanation, children. Jody filled with delight as he was told the fawn that he would carry it once he had taken a bit of rest. Jody recalled that his father had told him that fawn will follow you once if you carried it for a bit first. Jody started walking at a slow pace and the fawn looked as he walked further. Jody came back again to curses it and went forward again. This time the fawn took a few weak steps in Jody's direction as he cried. Although wobbling, Jody was overjoyed by the fact that it was willing to go with him, which made the fawn his own. He was so overjoyed that it could not even think properly and clearly. At that moment, Jody wanted to curse it with all his desire, play with it and call it towards him, but he did not want to frighten it. Then he picked the fawn again in his arms and walked effortlessly. Let's move to the next one. His arms began to ache and he was forced to stop again. When he walked on, the fawn followed him at once. He allowed it to walk a little distance, then picked it up again. The distance home was nothing. He could walked all day and into the night, carrying it and watching it follow. He was wet with sweat, but a light breeze blew through the June morning, cooling him. The sky was as clear as spring water in a blue china cup. He came to the clearing. It was fresh and green after the night's rain. He fumbled with the latch and was finally obliged to set down the fawn to manage it. Then he had an idea. He would walk into the house, into Penny's bedroom, with the fawn walking behind him, but at the steps the fawn blinked and refused to climb them. He picked it up and went to his father. Penny lay with closed eyes. Jody called, "Pa, look." Penny turned his head. Jody stood beside him. The fawn clutched hard against him. It seemed to Penny that the boy's eyes were as bright as the fawn's. He said, "I am glad you find him." Now explanation, children. Jody stopped unwillingly as his arms started aching. The fawn followed him as he walked again. Jody would only allow the fawn to walk a few steps and then to pick it up again. Home was almost near. Jody could have picked it up and watched it follow all day, but he was tired and sweaty. A light breeze helped him dry his sweat on that June morning. The sky was so clear that it had been compared to spring water in a blue china cup. He reached the cleaning at last, which was green and fresh after the showers last night. It was a bit difficult for him to open the latch of the house, but he could do it once he set the fawn down. At first, he thought of making the fawn follow directly into Penny's room and surprise him. But the fawn refused to climb the stairs, so Jody had to pick him up to his father's bedroom. His dad was resting with closed eyes. Jody called, "Pa, look." Penny turned his head. Jody stood beside him. The fawn clutched hard against him. It seemed to Penny that the boy's eyes were as bright as the fawn's eyes. He said, "I am glad you find him." Jody waked his father up and stood beside the Penny, turned his head towards him. The fawn grasped him firmly. Penny could see Jody's eyes as bright and glowing as the fawn's. Penny expressed his happiness over Jody having been able to find the fawn. Let's move to the next paragraph. Jody then went to the kitchen. The fawn walked after him. A pan of morning's milk stood in the kitchen sink. The cream had risen on it. He skimmed the cream into the jug. He poured milk into the small gourd. He held it out to the fawn. It butted it suddenly, smelling the milk. He saved it precariously from spilling over the floor. It could make nothing of the milk in the gourd. Now explanation. Jody went straight to the kitchen after that, and the fawn followed him with his weak steps. In the kitchen, a pan filled with morning's milk was kept reserved, but cream had formed on it. He skimmed the cream and put it into a jug, while he poured the milk in a utensil made of a small gourd. The fawn sniffed and milked as Jody saved the milk for being spilled. The fawn could not drink the milk out of the gourd. Now let's move to the next. He dipped his fingers in the milk and thrust them into the fawn's soft, wet mouth. It sucked greedily. When he withdrew them, it bleated frantically and butted him. He dipped his finger again, and as the fawn sucked, he lowered them slowly into the milk. The fawn blew and sucked and snorted. It stamped its small hoofs impatiently. As long as he held his fingers below the level of milk, the fawn was content. It closed its eyes dreamily. It was ecstasy to feel its tongue against his hands. Its small tail flicked back and forth. The last of the milk vanished in a swirl of foam and gurgling. Now explanation, children. So Jody dipped his finger in the milk and put them in its soft wet mouth instantly, which the fawn sucked greedily. He was hungry, which is why when Jody took his fingers out of its mouth, it cried and hit him with his head. The next time Jody put his fingers in the fawn's mouth, he gently lowered it so as to bring him to near the utensil. The fawn became impatient, blew the milk as he sucked it and made sound. The fawn was claimed. Jody kept his finger inside the milk and he drank with the eyes closed in satisfaction. Jody felt overwhelmed on feeling its tongue against his hands as his small tail moved back and forth. The milk disappeared quickly, forming foam, which was marked by the bubbling sound. Now, what is the moral of this lesson, children? Let's come to know that. Love and compassion are necessities without which humanity cannot survive. True compassion means not only feeling another's pain but also being moved to help relieve. In this chapter, Jody is emotionally preoccupied with a fawn whose mother had to be killed to save his father's life. That's all, children. Thank you.